Don't get it twisted. Just because we are in the sideways summer phase of the market doesn't mean there isn't about to be a big move in the crypto market. And the mistake I think a lot of people make is that they actually log off over summer, even though historically these are some of the best months to get a leg up in the market. If you look at 2023, those who were locked in during that period did really, really well in the lead up to 2024, especially in Q1 when things started to explode. If you look at other years as well, like 2021, we had a big summer lull before an explosion towards the end of the year. So seasonality definitely shows us that the latter halves of the year, especially where we are right now in the cycle, in the 18-year cycle, which is something we're going to touch on later in this video, are absolutely crucial in terms of nailing your performance in the market. So in today's video, I want to take a bit of a step back firstly and look at where I think we sit as a cycle overall, because it's been a few weeks since I've touched on the macro picture. I'll give you my general plan in terms of when I think Bitcoin's going to hit a peak, how I would look to rotate into alts. I want to talk about the structural nature of the current altcoin market and how you can actually make money in altcoins. You know, despite a lot of people saying that there'll never be an alt season, I have a slightly different opinion, which I want to share with you today. And then after we give a macro look at the market, I want to go and give a more of a micro view of where the market currently sits, some of the recent launches that have happened, which you should be paying attention to, some of the best trading setups in the market, and I'm also going to look at some upcoming token launches in the market to try and give you guys a bit of an alpha edge heading into the next few months in crypto. So if you are interested in nailing your strategy this year, if you want to know the game plan for the next couple of months to succeed in this market, the levels to watch, the altcoins to watch, you've come to the right place, because in today's video, we are going to cover all of that. And I think I've built a really, really good show for you guys out today to help you understand where we are in the macro cycle and where we are as it pertains to altcoins. So if you do enjoy content like this, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit that post notification bell for future uploads. You'll notice I'm not in my normal studio because I'm traveling right now, but I still want to come here and give you guys an important market update today. I'm not doing daily uploads right now, but I'm definitely going to upload when I think I have value over this next little period. And I believe I have some good value, guys, for you guys today. So before we get into the macro side of things, let's firstly talk about a quick market update in terms of where we sit. If you want to look at Bitcoin right now, I just want to do a little bit of technical analysis on Bitcoin. You can see that on the 4-hourly time frame right now, we're still in a range for Bitcoin. So just to recap, you have the range low at 100K, which actually held. You had deviation and a wick into it, but then it quickly reclaimed, and you have a range high at 110, and then you have this mid-range pivot point level at 106.5. It's kind of remarkable because these have been the levels since May. So if you're a little bit confused as to what's happening in the market right now in terms of directionality, well, I can't really blame you, because we have been chopping. There's been lots of periods in the market to get really excited as you head into resistance, and there's been lots of periods in the market to feel scared as we head into support. But you have to realize, when it comes to range trading, when it comes to swing trading, what you're looking for is a definitive break of either range high or range low in order to determine the next expansive move. Because if you actually zoom out, you can see this is just compression, not dissimilar to other compression zones like we saw in April when Bitcoin coils up before another big move. And obviously sometimes compression happens to the upside, sometimes it happens to the downside, like this move here last year, but nonetheless, compression often resolves in a major move in the market. So looking at Bitcoin now, we know that we have to monitor range high for a breakout, and we know we have to manage range low for a breakdown. Now, as you can see the chart here, I want to go into the lower time frame. If you go into the hourly, we are grinding upwards, so we are making higher lows. But the level that we do need to break in order to affirm a trend shift is this level here. This is the next high, which is 108.9. If we go back onto the 4-hourly, you can see Bitcoin actually is making lower highs at the moment unless we breach this level. So we have an interesting scenario right now where we keep making lower highs. This is a high, this is a lower high, this is an equal high, this is another lower high, this is another lower high, unless we end up sweeping this zone at 108.7 and we're actually compressing right now. So we have a higher time frame, lower high, but we have a lower time frame upwards move with higher lows. This is classic compression on Bitcoin, which is likely going to result in a big move in the short term. So what you can do in terms of trading is just keep your eye on this chart, make sure we're holding above the mid-range in terms of any short-term bullish bias, and if we start to break down below, especially this 106.5k level, the increased likelihood of 100k comes into play. But as we're going to discuss later in this video, my bias from a macro perspective is that we're going to go a lot higher. And in today's video, I want to go through the reasons why I believe that's the case and how you can play it. Because although Bitcoin, on the 4 hour continues to chop, I do think, especially as you start, to zoom out onto the weekly time frame for Bitcoin, if you look at a chart like this does look like it wants to break higher. And we know we have 120, 150, 180. If you actually look at the chart here, you can toggle log on and off depending on how bullish you want the chart to look. Obviously, if you go onto log, it looks extremely bullish, but I'm going to keep it level-headed here and turn log off. You can see that Bitcoin is continuously pressing against the all-time high level. And typically when it comes to a key level, whether it be a support level or a resistance zone, the more times you test that level, the higher chance it has of breaking. And this does look to be the case on the weekly. So although we might continue chopping in the short term, and although we have this range, which actually looks quite small when you go onto the weekly, between 100 and 110k, just keep in mind, the bias on the weekly, on the higher time frames, does look like Bitcoin wants to go higher. So most of my actions in the market are keeping this in mind. I'm still expecting a higher Bitcoin later in the year. In a minute here, I'm going to run you through the economic cycle, something Jason Pizzino talks a lot about, and discuss why, in line with the stock market, Bitcoin actually looks like it wants to go higher. And if this is the case, we definitely don't want to be too defensive, but certainly, looking at the lower time frame charts and making sure we maneuver correctly. For example, when Bitcoin goes down to 100k, actually using this as an opportunity to buy. And if we break above, using this as a potential risk on signal. For example, whilst everyone was panicking last week during the whole Middle Eastern news and all that conflict, I actually did a video where I said, everyone's dumping alts, but I'm buying. 30-day recovery plan. And in this video, if you guys watched it, the 14,000 that did, I think, have a leg up on the market now, know that I was actually buying during this period where everyone else was panicking. I highlighted this post about how stock markets tend to rebound after announcements. I talked about relative strength. We had a look at SPX at $1, which ended up bouncing, I think, back to $1.60. I looked at useless. This was at 0.086. Useless coin is now at 0.19. So you can see I talked about the rally-based rally pattern, and I said I was buying this zone. So absolutely, incredible that we're actually able to get those opportunities. So I haven't uploaded much in the past couple of weeks, but I feel like when I have uploaded, I've been pretty on the money recently. And if you have been watching, you know this. 13 days ago, we talked about how the move to the upside was a trap with Paradise. That was the move that ended up taking us down from this trap here at 109 all the way down to 100. And then I did a video a few days later talking about how everyone's dumping alts, but I'm actually buying. You can go back and watch that video. You'll see I was buying the strongest coins in the market, SPX, Hype, Useless, which all rebounded super strongly. And I also took some perp trades in the Discord, as you can see here, on SPX, on WorldCoin. So I feel like over the past couple of weeks, although I haven't been uploading a lot, I really have done a good job at keeping you guys up to date. So I hope everyone that's been watching these videos has actually been outperforming the market, because there's been, a lot of people freaking out and a lot of people just making rash decisions every time we come down to range low or go to range high, like people start buying, but we've actually just been playing the range. And the more we chop in the range, the more money we make, because, we've actually been able to play the fear and greed cycles as we have been moving, despite the headlines or the wall of warriors. Jason's been calling it in his recent videos. So very happy with how we've played it over the past few weeks, but I want to zoom out now and talk what's happening from a macro perspective, because I do think sometimes we get a little bit distracted by all the short-term headlines. I think sometimes, especially if you go on X, Bitcoin will be pumping, everyone will get really excited, Bitcoin will be dumping, everyone will be getting really upset, and we actually forget where we're going. And the most money, isn't made on these little intraday trades. The most money is actually made by getting your directionality right over a longer period of time. And I think there is definitely evidence at the moment that there's still going to be quite a big leg, I think, in risk markets. And I I want to discuss that now. So this all starts with the stock market. The stock market recently made fresh highs. The NASDAQ also recently made fresh highs. So although Bitcoin is still technically just below all-time highs, risk assets are leading. And we've seen positive environments for altcoins and positive environments for Bitcoin come off the back typically of strong global liquidity factors and also strong factors in terms of risk and also lower rates. And we are in an environment now where rates are going to move lower. Stock market just broke all-time highs. Bitcoin is pressing up against all-time highs and global liquidity is on the rise. So this is a very good set of conditions, in my opinion, from a macro perspective to see that blow-off move actually occur. Now, I've been discussing for quite some time, and my theory hasn't changed. I've had no invalidation on this theory since the beginning of the year, that Bitcoin is going to peak later in the year, Q3, Q4, heading into potentially Q1 2026. Then I think there is some decent evidence to suggest a cool-off on Bitcoin potentially in the first half of 2026 before a secondary wave potentially later in the year due to quantitative easing. And that's when I think that's going to begin, probably later in the year once rates actually come down, because they still have to come down a bit first. And I think that initial pump that's going to happen off the back of forecasted rate cuts is going to cause that initial spike as Bitcoin catches up to the current global liquidity, which has been tracking. And then I think we're going to potentially come down, fake people out, and give another opportunity for that secondary run later in the year. This is something I've been saying for many, many months. That's a bit more of a macro view. In terms of a short-term view, focusing on a potential Bitcoin breakout heading into the second half of the year, and that's not far away now. That's the framework that I'm keeping in mind. And as it pertains to altcoins, we're going to discuss later in the video how I'm playing them. Remember, the biggest move for alts only really happens once Bitcoin puts in its high or has its final leg. And the reason alts have been bleeding versus Bitcoin, the reason why dominance has been rising, is because Bitcoin has the strongest narrative in the market right now. You know, you have treasury companies buying Bitcoin, you have sovereign adoption, you have company adoption, you have speculation on future adoption, you have Saylor bidding up the price, and all of this happening, while the macro backdrop is how it is. So you can see why Bitcoin is going up. And then alts have their own structural issues, which we'll speak about. You know, dispersion, a lot of new launches, a lot of buyer fatigue, which has created this discrepancy in the market. But that discrepancy can minimize a little bit if serious risk-on conditions come. And that happens when we get an expansive breakout for Bitcoin. And then I think at some point we're going to see alts run. I've spoken to many people about this as well, trying not to operate in an echo chamber. Like, I've been speaking to other analysts and, other even big Bitcoin maxis. And most people I speak to think, although we're not going to see alt seasons like in the past, we should still see a strong run from alts at some point. And those risk-on conditions or lights-on conditions tend to create outsized opportunities in the market. And hey, even over the past couple of weeks, a coin like Useless, which I called in the Discord and then again on the YouTube video recently, this is already up from my first Discord mention in the AMA of 4x, from the latest YouTube video a 2x. So that's a really recent opportunity we capitalized on. Syrup is another coin that I've been speaking about recently a lot in the Discord at 38 cents. Also on the YouTube channel during the dip. This has been an outperformer in the market. Hyperliquid, a coin that I first called at $8, been an outperformer in the market. Obviously, not everything has gone up. There have been other coins I've spoken about which have done badly, but recently we've had a hit rate that's quite strong because I've just been focusing on the strongest narratives in the market. And if you do that with altcoins, even if there's a lot of dispersion, you're probably going to end up doing quite well. But going back to this macro discussion before we get back into alts again, I want to talk to you a little bit about this real estate cycle. I'm not going to pitch it or talk to you about it too much because this is Jason's thing. This is his framework. But this framework is very aligned, in my opinion, with the current macro backdrop, the factors that we're going to see in terms of cutting rates, in terms of potential easing. This is all in line as well with current price action on stocks and Bitcoin. And what this suggests is that, over the last pretty much since markets have been around in the US, I think the last 200 years, we've seen this cycle, which is roughly 18 and a half years, which keeps repeating. And this is to do with the real estate market and the effect that causes downstream in terms of other liquid markets. And typically we see these cycles go with a 7-year first half where they go up. Then we see a mini crash or a mid-cycle slowdown. Then we see another 7 years of things, going up. Then we see a major recession, which is, your collapse period before the cycle repeats again. And what we're heading into now is this blow-off period in the market. Now, 2026 should be the turning point according to the real estate cycle, where the market starts to reverse and we start to see bearish conditions. but this could take years to play out. 2027, 2028 look like they could be quite negative years in the market based on this cycle. So this also aligns with my theory that, we probably see a Bitcoin peak towards later in the year, or Q1. Then we see a big blow off peak in 2026, and that acts as the blow off for the market, and then, a longer recovery in markets. Even if Bitcoin goes to 150, 200K, then the drawdown, it can be back to 120, 130, 140. So it could still be higher than where it is currently, but percentage-wise, it could be a 40, 50% drawdown, whilst risk assets also have a big downturn as well. If you actually look at the Bitcoin power curve cycle cloud, this model also aligns, and this takes the Bitcoin price, the power curve support, the min/max level of the 4-year cycles combined, and as well as the mean. This also is reflecting a similar theory to the real estate cycle as well, with a blow-off in this index set to happen in January 2026, which is something I discussed. What this doesn't have is a secondary wave later in the year, which I think will be fueled by easing conditions, but that does make sense because that is a macro factor, that's a monetary factor based on monetary policy, which can't be factored into this because this is just taking the cycle averages. So my framework, although I expect we could see a second run in 2026, is generally that the big peak, or the first big peak, is going to happen later in the year. And that's where I want to be taking a lot of profits, not only on my Bitcoin, but on my altcoins. And I don't know what they are yet, but at the time on my new altcoin trades as well. Because remember, when the market is really frothy, like we saw even in November for a small period, this does create lots of short-term opportunities in the market, which I'm very interested in capitalizing on, right? Because as you guys know, my strategy this year has been, okay, hold 50% in terms of long-term exposure. That's my hedge. That's going to give me exposure to the upside of the market, but then hold 50% in cash. And that 50% in cash, I can go in and out of market opportunities with, like the useless trade, like the syrup trade, like the WorldCoin trade, like all of these trades that I'm doing, like buying SPX. If I didn't have that liquidity from holding that higher cash basis, I wouldn't be able to trade a lot of these coins. Now, just to give you a short update, a lot of the positions that I took during the war news, I ended up taking profits on towards the end of last week because I wanted to go flat. I didn't really know about directionality in the beginning of this week, although we're ticking up. Now we're retracing a little bit today. It's just a really choppy market at the moment. So I've gone a bit defensive again, looking for my next big cash deployment. My next big cash deployment probably comes, once again, just like last time, no matter what the headline is, on either a retest of range low, which is the 100K zone, or a confirmed break of 110. What you have to realize, especially when it comes to altcoins, right, is that there's huge information asymmetry. Most market participants are out of the market right now. Not a lot of people are paying attention right now. That creates a big asymmetry where Bitcoin, theoretically, right, it could break range high. Because this is a question I get a lot. Or what if I'm not fully positioned right now, but Bitcoin breaks out? Am I going to be sidelined? Well, my answer is not really, because even if we do this, right, people still won't be really interested here. It's mostly going to be a Bitcoin-led run. Yes, some altcoins will be pumping, but most will lag behind. Then, as we start to retrace, consolidate, I think you can take a position on some altcoin trades, and then it's only at this second leg of expansion that a lot of people are going to start. I'm not saying we're going to go up like this quickly, right? It's probably going to happen later in the year, but I'm just giving you an example. On this big leg, that's when the mainstream people are going to come in. You have to keep in mind, people aren't really like reactive in crypto. Like a lot of people just aren't paying attention. The smart players on a confirmed break of 110, like even like on the first daily close, and this will be me, I will start to look at some positions as we consolidate here. Even if we break straight through, the next big retrace, I'll look to take some positions as we form our next base. And a lot of the market will only start to play catch up after that. So a lot of the altcoins will only start running on the Bitcoin catch-up trade, because when Bitcoin pumps, a lot of people feel like, oh, I must have missed the move. So if it goes like this, people feel like, oh, I've missed the move. I got to get into alts now. So if Bitcoin really, really expands to the upside, I think there'll be a lot of catch-up on alts, especially the strong alts. So the answer to the question of, should I be panicked if Bitcoin breaks highs and I'm not positioned to the market? I don't think you need to be. Of course, I keep some positioning. I'm 50% deployed, 50% not deployed, because I don't know when the breakout's going to happen, and there are some alts I just want to see those theses play out, right? I'm not going to try and time it too much. However, I certainly am interested with my liquid cash position in trying to time the market a little bit more, because I think there is an information asymmetry. Retail will pile in after Bitcoin is already starting to approach its local top or has already made a big move. And there's a window in the interim, and this can be a window of a few days to weeks. If you're following me, you won't miss it, where you can actually get into trades. And that's a huge opportunity in the market, in my opinion. So to summarize on the macro discussion, because I'm getting more questions about it, I still think there's nothing that's changed in the real estate cycle. There's nothing that's changed with these power curve models. There's nothing that's changed in terms of my macro view that we're probably going to peak later in the year. And there's nothing that's changed in terms of summer chop. How long on this channel have I been speaking about summer chop? We know that summers are choppy, and we know that they're lower liquidity and lower volume. So although the headlines are different every time, this time it was Middle East headlines, and there could be more headlines which cause more chop later down the track to the upside or downside. The underlying price action is still usually the same during summer, and this is just a cyclical thing. And if summer's playing out like I thought, then I think the end of the year is also going to play out similarly in terms of how it's reacted in the past, and that is typically with a violent explosion. And balance of probability suggests this explosion is going to happen to the upside. Now, let's go into alts. This will be a slightly longer video today, but I really want to give you a comprehensive market view because I just want to make sure by the end of this, you're really equipped with the right game plan, the right alts, and the right strategy to smash it in the market. So if you're interested in smashing it in the market, make sure you also smash that like button to show the algorithm that you're getting some value out of this video, because I really do want to help people and help guide them, because I'm seeing a lot of just crazy opinions and knee-jerk reactions happening all the time. But if you actually zoom out, you can really simplify your plan here. Now let's talk about the altcoin market in a little bit more depth. There are a few really key charts I want to run through. First is others BTC. People keep calling for alt season, and I'm starting to hate that word because the market's changed. So even the next alt season will look different. But, I use it anyway because people respond to it and they kind of understand when you say alt season what you mean. You mean alts outperforming Bitcoin, right? But, every time we get a little bit of a pump like this, or like this, or like this, every time people call for alt season. But the reality is it's lower highs than others BTC. Now, I don't like Bitcoin dominance because it doesn't exclude stablecoins. So if you're going to look at dominance, you have to look at Bitcoin dominance excluding stables. I still chart it because everyone else is looking at it and it's still relevant, but the metrics don't tell the full picture. I like the others BTC chart because this is the total index minus the top 10 versus Bitcoin. So this is going to show you the broader altcoin market versus Bitcoin. Now, we are in a downtrend, right? So until this downtrend is over, alts are going to keep bleeding versus Bitcoin. This doesn't mean alts are going to go down necessarily. It just means Bitcoin's going to outperform. Now, I have a theory. My theory is that we're probably going to keep going down to this support level here. And although you can't really do TA on an index like this, my feeling is that this level would represent max pain for alts versus Bitcoin, based on what we've seen previously in terms of when the market rallies. It typically has the strongest rallies after big sell-offs. So somewhere in this zone, I view as a potential bottoming zone for alts versus BTC. However, I don't think this drop down to this level would happen by alts actually going down. I think this will happen with the Bitcoin breakout. Of course it could, there's always a chance Bitcoin breaks down, and we'll keep our eye on the lower time frame, because even though I have a macro view, is it possible in July we go down? Yes. Look, I don't think that'll be the case. I have an opinion that either we keep chopping just sideways or we go up. That's my bias. But even if something happens, some headline or some knee-jerk happens and we do end up going down, I still don't know if that's, the full trigger for the others BTC chart to hit this level. I think this level is going to happen on a BTC breakout. Why? Because I think what happens on a BTC breakout is a lot of the attention goes towards Bitcoin, and Bitcoin actually runs even harder. Alts lag versus Bitcoin. And then when Bitcoin's finally broken out, then altcoins start to see a bit of life come into them, because people are speculating, as I mentioned before, because they missed the Bitcoin run. And then I think things turn around. But I just want to show you this chart and say, look, you should probably be charting this, because you can track this on the lower time frames as well. I'm on a crazy high time frame, which is the monthly, but you can look at a chart like this, right? And even look at the daily money noodle. We keep coming up and rejecting off it, and just play like simple levels here in terms of, determining your bias on alts. You can actually just wait for a reversal and see if alts start to gain some steam before, positioning. And then you can use Confluence, so line this up with the Bitcoin chart, so you can look for an alt reversal in line with the Bitcoin breakout. And that can be your trigger to go more risk on in terms of alts. So instead of being completely blind and wondering when are alts going to pump, just look at the charts. The charts will tell you everything that you need to know about altcoins right now. So one interesting thing that I want to highlight is that alts are approaching, and this does make sense because if you look at the monthly others BTC chart, you could see we're coming down to, a key support level, even though we've got a bit to go. We've been bleeding for quite some time, but it does seem like sentiment is now finally starting to get closer to max pain. And although maybe versus Bitcoin it still has some way to go, it's now starting to become more attractive to ladder into alts than before, in my opinion. And I think, look, if you have a longer time frame view on the market, if you are subscribing to my theory, that the market's going to be higher later in the year or, early next year, then I think what you can do is just accumulate quality alts over this choppy period and sit on them. And you'll probably end up doing quite well. Just because, one, alts will perform well eventually once Bitcoin puts in its peak, but also, as I mentioned before, we're starting to see this like max pain sentiment for alts. And this article really highlighted it. We saw Bloomberg's daily market review talk about how altcoins are struggling. So we're starting to see major publications starting to notice it now. We can see the alt season as a percentage of crypto assets, excluding stablecoins, now ticking under this dotted red line zone. That's only happened 4 times in the past 6 years. So 2023, 2022, end of 2020 and 2019. And afterwards, we've always seen big moves on alts. It's not typical that we spend very long behind, below this zone. Now, yes, there are some structural things which have changed in the altcoin market for sure. Sort of like price cycles. We are also seeing lower highs, so the altcoin seasons aren't as violent. But what we always see is some sort of reversal. So even if it isn't a full-blown reversal like cycles past, I think we will see a reversal. And we're seeing max pain in the index. We're starting to get max pain, well, not quite, but getting down there in terms of the altcoin ratio versus Bitcoin. We're starting to see the headlines coming out about it. When things really shift in the other direction, when the market zigs, you kind of got to zag. And I don't think this could be any different. Now, people might be wondering, okay, then what's the catalyst for alts to run? Beside the obvious, getting that altcoin bullish effect from a Bitcoin pump. By the way, alts are structurally different this cycle because there aren't any ETFs. Because they're Bitcoin ETFs and because there isn't as much Bitcoin to altcoin flow rotation as previous cycles. Alts running off the back of Bitcoin is not rotationary, it's actually anticipatory. So what I'm saying is people will position in alts, they'll try and speculate because they think they've missed Bitcoin. So it's going to be the sentiment lifting the ships, not the liquidity tide lifting the ships, which actually makes the altcoin pumps less strong because there's less actual structural bidding for these coins, but nonetheless it'll still happen, which is why I think you still got to be aware of it. But aside from that, what's another reason why alts could run? Well, there's this really interesting theory by Rect Diomedes, which I actually think is something people are sleeping on. And this is this headline here, that Crane Shares is filing for a Coinbase-50 index ETF. So we've seen Coinbase's perform really well. We've seen Circles perform really well. MicroStrategy, the Bitcoin treasury companies, they've been taking over the stock market right now. And there's a strong argument to be made that all these stocks pumping have actually sucked liquidity out of the crypto market. And what altcoins don't have that Bitcoin has is a passive bid at the moment. But this is a very interesting filing because this would be an ETF to track the performance of the top 50 alts in the market. And I think this is something that the market lacks. People want exposure to alts, right? But just like they want exposure to Bitcoin, but they don't want to pick Ethereum specifically. They don't want to pick Solana specifically. They just want to use alts as a risk-on levered proxy to Bitcoin, but they don't want to do it using paying funding through leverage or perps. They want to do it through an ETF. So what better than an altcoin index fund? It's very, very smart. And if this does get approved at some point, and there's probably a bit, more room for this to get approved. But if it does get approved at some point, that's going to be pretty needle moving in my opinion, because you'll have this speculation effect of, okay, if an altcoin is, let's say, rank 80, people are going to start bidding up these alts just in case they get into the top 50, because then they know there's a passive bid for an alt. Just like we saw with Coinbase getting into the S&P 500, went up 75% since that announcement because there's a passive bid through the S&P 500 ETFs. So then there's stocks, 600, 700 ranked stocks, which actually get a speculative bid off the back of, all right, if they do make it into the top 500, they're going to get a bigger bid. So this is actually giving people a reason to buy altcoins again. So a potential ETF here could be one of the big triggers for an altcoin run. And this didn't get much attention, as Rect Diomedes points out, but it could be insanely bullish. So that could be a reason why altcoins run later down the track. Just to wrap up on this altcoin section, then I'll get into some coins I'm actually looking at the moment. I did this tweet the other day. I said, I don't know why people are surprised that alts keep bleeding versus Bitcoin. What do you expect when you have increasing unlocks dispersion and decreasing demand in parallel? It's a new market structure. You have to adapt. You can't play the game like 2021 and expect it to work. And I think this is just a really important message to reiterate. Yes, I've been talking about this for many months, but for people who haven't adapted their portfolios yet, just keep in mind, this alt season, when it does come, will not be like the past ones. Everything will not go up all at once. It's going to be very driven by strong narratives. It's going to be driven by coins with PMF, product market fit. Not everything's going to go all up at once, but you're going to see some pretty powerful rotations from stuff that does. And I still think there is so much opportunity to make money in crypto. I saw Rand did this tweet yesterday. He's like, crypto's boring, but it's still the most exciting industry I've ever worked in. And I still agree. Even though the market is technically boring compared to other periods of the year or other cycles, there's still so much opportunity. I mean, I'll use Useless as an example. This is a coin that I found out about at 17 mil, didn't buy and talk about it myself until 50 mil, and it's still 4x'd. And that just happened in the last couple of weeks. And then there was a big launch coin trade that happened a month ago. Like, okay, maybe it's not a crazy market in terms of everything going up, but there are always opportunities. Always opportunities. So why would you clock out? I really don't understand why people clock out. Like, I'm, supposed to be not a full holiday, but on holiday right now, and I'm not clocking out at all. Like, I'm still coming here. I'm filming this video. I'm been doing research this morning. Like, I'm still locked in because I know that there are huge opportunities in this market. So, okay, yes, you can't play the game like 2021, but there are still massive opportunities in the market to actually profit. You just have to pick the right coins, invest in the right projects, and have a different approach. Holding a portfolio of 20 coins now isn't the way to go. I'm holding like 5 to 10 core positions. Yes, I have some barbell plays, some beta proxies to those coins, which maybe add my technical, spot exposure maybe closer to 10 to 15 coins, but the core positions are lower. And then 50% of my cash is ready for short-term opportunities because there are so many. Later in this video, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming launches because some of the new launches on Binance have been doing extremely well recently. So just keep that in mind. All right. Now we've talked about what the conditions could be for an alt season and what it's likely going to look like. Let's talk about some good alts at the moment. Now, since this video is already quite long, I'm going to give you a shorter version and talk about a few examples specifically, which I like, a few upcoming launches, which I like, and talk about, the new launch game. Some really important alpha I want to give you regarding new launches and how to actually make money off them today. And then later in the week, I'm going to do my full list or a bigger list for you guys. So this video doesn't become too long and I don't scare off, potential clicks, because if people see an hour video, they just don't click, even though I think, I'm sharing a lot of wisdom here with you guys. Fluid's one of them. Fluid's a coin that I also talked about DCAing during the big fight in my Discord, but still only at I think 160 million market cap with 1 billion TVL and 1.4 daily volume. I like this as a spot long-term play. I'm looking for protocols primarily right now with PMF. Mando highlights this infinite money glitch portfolio, Bitcoin, ETH, Hype, Aave, short all high FTV coins with terrible tokenomics and no PMF. So he's basically saying short coins with no PMF, product market fit, long coins with product market fit. And something like a Fluid has product market fit, something like a Syrup has product market fit, something like a Hyperliquid has product market fit and has been doing well, and I continue to add on the dips, one I also spoke about recently in my last video in my Discord that I did a week ago about buying that during the dip, and it ended up being a great opportunity. Long these coins. These are the coins you want to be holding into the rest of the year. Sui as well is another coin that I am quite interested in at the moment. Now, you guys will know, if you're an OG of the channel, I actually first called Sui at like 60 cents, but I actually sold a bit early, like at $1.80 into that resistance zone, and then it ended up running to $5. So I didn't hit, my best trade on this. But after this big retrace, I've slowly been adding more Sui to my portfolio because I am coming to the realization that outside of Solana, now I've been speaking to a lot of people behind the scenes, a lot of developers, that Sui is actually an ecosystem that people want to develop on. And so the reason I was so bullish on Solana when it was even $10, $20, $30, even during the FTX FUD in 2022, was because of the community. That's something I was, always really steadfast on, the fact it had an amazing developer community. I'm seeing similar signs from Sui. And now, I don't know if it'll play out exactly like Sol, and obviously prices come up a lot, but the fact it's come down a little bit, given me an opportunity to buy in, and I'm just seeing so many strong things behind the scenes, gives me some confidence that this could have a run later in the year. I know Raoul Powell's pushing it as well. I'm going to speak about an upcoming protocol that you need to keep your eye on later in today's video. That's on Sui, And it was actually one of the projects when I was speaking to the founder that made me realize how much is actually being built on Sui. Another one's Syrup that I've been talking about a lot. This one's done really well. It's come down a little bit to 55 cents now, run up to 65. This could be a dip worth buying. If you're going to take the short-term trade here, just be willing to cut quite quickly. Remember, big structural trades for me will happen. Either you're buying and you're holding long-term till the end of the year, that's okay. But big structural trades will, for me, happen on a break of Bitcoin all-time highs in confluence with specific altcoin pairs. And until then, I'm looking at picking lower time frame, short-term opportunities on alts. So those are a few of the liquid coins that I'm watching. I also want to touch on the new launch game quickly because I think new launches right now are actually doing quite well, and I want you to be prepared for later in the year because the new launches are some of the things, the new shiny objects, as we call them, that pump the hardest in the right environment. So if we do see a new Bitcoin high and alts run at some point, there's going to be a lot of strong launches, and these are going to be good opportunities for you to make money. EasyX is one that I spoke about recently. This had a slow launch. Well, it had a very good launch at first. Then it had a bit of a slow retrace, and now it's starting to form a nice range. So this is doing really, really well. This is one I also spoke about in my Discord. I had the team on for a co-AMA in the Discord, which was amazing. You guys learned a lot about the project. Highlighted this in MHC in my interesting projects channel where I share upcoming projects with you as they launch. As you guys know, if you're in the Mars High Club. And you can see here they just announced their new roadmap, and that's one of the reasons why they're up 26% today. So you can see in Q3, they're going to launch their testnet, EstateX University. They're going to launch their first project on the RWA Launchpad. When I was speaking to them, they said they're also going to launch their some more properties on the platform to allow people to buy properties. So lots of stuff coming later in the year. They're a proxy play for the property market, which I think is a niche that no RWA protocol has been able to nail yet. So this is one that I spoke about and has done really well and is following this launch fractal that I've discussed a lot, where you'll have a big pump and then a decline. Then you'll chop for a bit, you'll find a base, and there could be an opportunity to buy in. In terms of opportunities to buy this one, obviously do your own research, but if you're bullish, I would say this zone is starting to form as a nice support zone. At the 0.015 zone, if we do get there, there is a fair value gap starting to form here. So you could potentially look at that zone as a shorter term trade, but you'd want to cut on momentum because that, lower time frame you're trading on, the quicker you want to cut. If not, a break of all-time high, a confirmed break would be another level as long as you're playing with invalidation. But, from a long-term spot perspective, I always like to be a bit greedy. So these would be the zones to take a look at if you're bullish on that one for those wondering. There was another one as well, which recently launched, which this is a bit earlier. So this is a few days before EstateX. This is more closer to this zone here in terms of timeline. This is Sahara AI. So this is a project I'm actually quite bullish on fundamentally because they allow you to build your own agents and launch your own agents, and they have an agent marketplace. So they're basically offering a stack for you to be able to train AI models, monetize AI models, and build your own agents. So I'm very bullish that the future of crypto is agents. That's why I've taken positions in a variety of protocols in that space, always looking for projects that are building towards that vision. And this is a new one that launched that caught my eye. So in terms of the Fractal, I think this is another great example of a coin that, look, this is quite simple. It's actually respecting price action, and a lot of new coins actually respect technicals more than older coins. You can see this level down here. Let's go on to the highlighter here so you can see it clearly. This level down here is a key level of interest. If we head down there again at the 0.08 level, this would be a zone that I'm interested in adding. And then you can just play this range. You can cut below, play in this range, and then you can also play off the breakout of highs. And often a mid-range also starts to form. It looks like this is the zone, but it might be a bit too early to call yet because it is a bit nascent. It's only been a few days. So with new launches, you'll typically want to wait for a base, then start to position as long as it's showing that it has support in that region. And it does look like thus far, this is the region to potentially look at. They have a lot of big backers, by the way. They have YZI Labs, who are previously Binance Labs, Marana Ventures, Polychain Capital, Pantera, Sequoia, Samsung. Absolutely massive, massive, massive cap table, which I quite liked about the project as well. So keeping my eye on this one, wanted to put this on your radar. And other new launches that come up, I'm going to put on your radar as well. Like if we look at some of the upcoming launches right now that I'm looking at, so you don't miss them, I'll name a couple now. One is Rainmaker. This is one that I like. This is also like Sahara in the agent space, so it allows you to train video, train agents, and train data. The very interesting thing about this is you can actually make money off this. So I recommend, if you have a bit of spare time and you want to do some homework from this video, actually going onto their website, rainmaker.com, download the app, and you can test actually training your own models on your phone, and you can make money for that, and you can monetize that, which is quite cool. And obviously, the higher the token goes, the bigger the rewards are going to be. The more data you contribute, the more rewards you can earn. So I'll probably do a dedicated tutorial or a bit more discourse about this later in time. But this is a model that I think could be very, very cool. And I know the founder, personally, he's very deep into the entertainment space. So he understands video quite well, and he understands the power of data. An AI company is only as valuable as the data that it has. And Rainmaker, ultimately, if you want to simplify it, it's a data company. And with AI, you can actually attain data a lot cheaper than traditional measures. I did this dashboard here, which was custom built on Rainmaker, and you can see that it has a competitive advantage over even some of the traditional models in terms of its ability to actually train these models at lower cost, which I think is very, very important. And the only way to build something like this is one of the questions I asked him actually when I met him is, why not just launch this in Web 2? You could have training in Web 2 and you don't need Web 3. But what he said is Web 3 are the only rails to make this possible. We wouldn't have launched a project if we didn't think we needed to launch, but we needed the token as an incentivization mechanic to gain network effect and traction from having people all over the world be able to actually earn from contributing to the chain. Just like, WorldCoin. Sam Altman wouldn't have launched a coin, WorldCoin, if he didn't think that they needed a network to actually act as an incentivization method to actually grow the network effect of the world chain or WorldCoin chain network. So Rainmaker is a similar concept. One thing I also liked is that they're actually fee generating. I think $4 million last year, but this is before the token. Obviously, once the token launches, you can gain a lot more traction, network effects, and they could make a lot more. So when we go back to the PMF discussion, looking for protocols that are actually creating real revenue, this is a big focus of mine at the moment. You can see this dashboard here. I went through the tech. So they have the video platform, GPU infrastructure. They also partner with Aether and other big protocols for that. And you can see their tokenomics here as well. Just a few of the points on, if you want to pause the video, on utility and value accrual. So I'll touch on that more in a future video, but wanted to put it on your radar today. Another one that's on my radar, after speaking to the founder, as I mentioned before, I think we're going to do some work together, which is great, is momentum. This is one I'm actually quite bullish on now. As I mentioned, I wasn't that big on SUI. Well, I was big at first, and then it ran up, and then I kind of lost conviction just based on the price. Now that price has come down, and now I've done a lot more research into the ecosystem, I've started to become quite bullish. And one of the projects that made me more bullish, and one of the projects that I have learned more about that I think is going to act as a very strong proxy to SUI and could be even bigger later down the track as they expand, is momentum. And the way to think about momentum is that they are going to be the central liquidity engine of the Move ecosystem. So if you actually look recently, they've gained a lot of market share off the back of the CETUS hack. They are very well positioned to be number one. And if they can become number one, they essentially become the most profitable application on the chain. You can make an argument that owning the momentum token, as long as they, execute well on the token side, is actually better in some ways than owning SUI, because the fees, just like, Jupiter and Radium, the fees of the network actually go, momentum's capturing the lion's share. Obviously, with the SUI token, there's some gas, but with their VE tokenomics and with the pools and the fact that swaps are happening using momentum's liquidity, it actually could end up being a better proxy than owning SUI itself. So for me, this is a launch I'm really excited in, one that I'm investing in personally as well, because I think that this can be like a very good proxy to the growth of the SUI ecosystem, which you don't really have many good ones at the moment. And the ones that did launch, even pre-CETUS hack, it had a huge valuation. So these guys could come in with 5x the TVL once they, get things going with their flywheel and really take over that space. So I'd be on the lookout for this one as well. This is probably coming later in the year. Rainmaker, I think, based on my discussions, will be sooner, and then Momentum will be later in the year. But I want to keep you up to date with the latest launches, because these new launch fractals right now, a lot of them are actually playing out. And because the market is so bad for new launches, because of altcoin dilution, the good ones, if they get lost, like, I never suggest aping, a new launch on day one, ever. But If they have a big dip, like a StateX had a big dip, Sahara is going through a little bit of a dip now. It could even get worse. That could be an opportunity. Momentum could even, dip when it launches. Who knows? If the market doesn't price them correctly in the early days, that's where the opportunity is. So I'm not saying blindly ape when things launch. That's stupid. But as it starts to build a floor, as it starts to follow the fractal, if there's an opportunity to get in, then you can get in and actually do quite well as it starts to climb, as long as it's a solid protocol. So I'm going to continue putting the new launches that are good on your map. Doesn't guarantee they'll all explode on day one, but it's stuff to look at and stuff to research. And this is how you can develop your information edge over time. You want to continue to research on potentially profitable vehicles, and you will stumble across many just by staying locked in the market. So going back to the intro of this video, now is not the time to give up. Now is not the time to be locking out. I'd be doing the opposite. As I actually told you guys last year, mid-year, I remember sitting in a villa in Marbella filming a video. And I remember the video was saying, you guys got to lock in because the end of the year is going to be crazy. This is just the cyclical nature of markets, and November was insane. And I'm sitting here and I'm saying it again now. June 30th, 2025, lock in, because these are the quiet periods in the market where you got to build your edge. And if the macro cycle plays out like it has many, many times before, things are about to get crazy. I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe for more. Resources in the description below. And hope you have a lovely rest of your day as usual. Peace out.